I'm sure that Russia will move the troops to other side of our borders. Whatever military aggression Russia would start against NATO, we will hit into the heart of Russia, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. I think that we have some kind of special relation with the US.
Hello and welcome. European leaders are facing tough decisions this week on how to fund Ukraine's war effort, just as Moscow issues new threats against Europe. Today I'm going on the record with Margus, Tsahkna, the Foreign Minister of Estonia, to ask him if his country, as well as two other Baltic nations of Latvia and Lithuania, are bracing for a Russian assault. Good afternoon, Minister. Thank you for joining us. So we heard Vladimir Putin threaten to take by force unspecified lands, but the ones that historically, he claims, belonged to Russia. Can this be seen as a threat to your country, to Latvia and Lithuania?
Yes, we can say that. And this plan of Putin has been published already by President Putin in 2007, so many years ago, during the Munich Security Conference. And we have been very clear on that, together with the Baltic states and also, I can say, Poland, that Russia will be a threat for Europe. But of course, it was not, unfortunately, seriously taken. And what we saw was 2008, the Georgian aggression. Till now, 20% of Georgian territory is occupied. Then reactions were very smooth from Europe and western part of the world. And then what we saw was 2014, then actually the Ukraine war started. And I think that the reaction from Europe side, they were not solid at all. The other way around, actually, there was pretty many leaders who were thinking that having practical and good relations with Russia is a good thing, and also have economical ties. Actually, it was a big strategic mistake.
If I may interrupt here, we know this historical context, but what I'm trying to ask you is whether you feel or you see any evidence that Putin is indeed preparing to attack your countries, which are seen as among the most vulnerable in Europe.
Yeah, but I don't see that our countries are most vulnerable. We are just on the border, as many others, as Poland and also Finland and some others. But the case is that, yes, we see that Russia is not having the full-scale capabilities the other side of our borders. What I saw as a defense minister of Estonia 2016 and 17 was 120,000 troops ready to move within 48 hours. But these troops were sent to Ukraine and they're literally dead. But what we see is that Russia is preparing and investing heavily to military infrastructure the other side of our borders, mainly as well the north path, because Finland and Sweden joined the NATO, and Russia will have as well the plans definitely for the future. But it depends now as well what kind of peace will come in Ukraine, if it comes at all. And if Russia will have a success there, I'm sure that Russia will move the troops to other side of our borders, and then will be as well very direct threat militarily, full scale, if the political will of Putin will be there. But it depends on as well what kind of deterrence we will have in our NATO borders.
Right. So in other words, you're saying that there is a paradox that if there is peace in Ukraine, it may actually increase pressure on the Baltic states and Finland.
Indeed, but the question is what kind of peace? If the peace is just and lasting, and if there will be the solid security guarantees, and I'm not talking about Ukraine only, but I'm talking about our region. So the deterrence will be strong, and I think that Putin is not able to wage the war against NATO. So we are not talking about Estonia and Latvia, Lithuania. We are talking about then the aggression against NATO. So this is the most important thing. And also we have now the new defense plans, which were adopted 2 years ago in Vilnius NATO summit. And it means as well that whatever military aggression Russia would start against NATO, we will hit into the heart of Russia. So we don't let Russia come into our territories and then fight it back. So this is totally different world. And of course, now we need to use the time to invest heavily to defense.
I know we're in a speculative territory, and I apologize if it sounds a little rude or jumping to a conclusion, but would your country and other Baltic states be prepared or are prepared to repel the initial assault without NATO immediate assistance, or is this immediate NATO assistance calculated into your defense plans?
Immediate NATO response is calculated to our response, but of course, whatever happens on hybrid level or in real military aggression, we fight back from the first second. There is no question. But it's a question of Europe. It's a question of NATO existentially as well. And we have a proof for that as well. When the 19th of September, we had a very brutal violation by 3 Russian fighter jets for 12 minutes. And everything worked well as it was planned by NATO. About the NATO fighters went up. But also we got Article 4 consultations, and we saw that the unity in NATO is behind the eastern flank very clearly. So, I'm not going to follow the speculations, what will happen from the first second, but the plans are there and our readiness is very high.
Right. This week we saw the formation of what the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called the Northern Bloc of NATO members facing Russia and Belarus. And this includes the Baltic states, Finland, Poland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. Is this a small NATO within NATO?
I can say that NATO is NATO, and together with US and Europe. But I can say very clearly that this Nordic-Baltic operation has been increased heavily, and it's very efficient after Finland and Sweden joined NATO. And as well, we see on figures that we all invest heavily more to our defense. We're cooperating and coordinating our defense cooperation much more than before. And we're leading many questions about the hybrid threats, about preparation for the military defense, and also the defense industry cooperation is pretty strong. But also on political level, in NATO and also in European Union, we are very active in coordinating our behaviors. And as well, for the next year, Estonia is going to lead and chair this NV8 cooperation. So you can say, and I agree with you, that this is some kind of logical frame what we do. And also, if you see how much European countries are supporting Ukraine, these Nordic Baltic countries, and as well Poland, Germany and Netherlands, we are taking the most responsibilities about the military support as well financial support.
Do you treat this as some form of an insurance policy if, let's say, some of the problems and divisions in Europe prevent Europe from making bold decisions? Is this an insurance policy, this Northern Bloc?
We can call it insurance policy, but it is mainly based on the same understanding that Russia is a threat directly to us. Most of us, we have as well the border with Russia, and we are very much connected to each other. So this is very important to understand that this is like the regional interest for everybody. And I can say maybe the biggest change of the attitude happened in Sweden. After like close to 300 years of neutrality, Sweden decided to join the NATO, as well Finland, which has a long border. So after these decisions, I think that we are more practically like-minded countries, and we are making plans how can we react if the threat will come.
Right. Mr. Tusk said that this new grouping will be mostly about coordinating defense preparations, but also to press the EU for more money on eastern flank defenses. Let's listen to what he said.
I didn't imagine it would be recognized by all of Europe as a European priority. We are now planning to invest close to 10 billion, not just a billion or two as we initially thought. And this will also include European money from various sources.
Now we have a simple choice. Either money today or blood tomorrow. And I am not talking about Ukraine only, I am talking about Europe. And this is our decision to make, and only ours. I think all European leaders have to finally rise to this occasion.
So, Is there a military aspect of this new format, this Northern Bloc, or is this mostly political, as you earlier mentioned?
It is political, of course, but it is very practical as well. It is military cooperation. Of course, we had it before, but in the frame of NATO, it's much more clear. And as well, if we see the new regional defense plans that NATO adopted in Vilnius 2 years ago during the summit, this is very practical approach. So we have our responsibilities, we have sharing about the capabilities because Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, we have no full scale of different domain capabilities. And that's why it is very important. And I totally agree with the Polish leader that for Europe is now crucial times to understand that we cannot continue as an old fat cat who is expecting that somebody else is coming and pouring the milk to our cans and taking responsibilities our security. We need to do more, and I think this is Nordic Baltic cooperation together with Poland and as well now Germany. We are leading this process in Europe.
So why was Germany missing from that meeting in Helsinki?
I don't know exactly why Germany was missing because it was much more like the Nordic Baltic cooperation, but we are very close with Germany, and Germany has been decided as well to locate the full-scale brigade to Lithuania, and as well taking really practical responsibility from the Baltic states' military defense. So this cooperation is very close.
So taking into account everything we've discussed so far, this new bloc, Germany's involvement, are you feeling more confident than, let's say, 6 months ago, than the regional partners, NATO allies will come to the rescue if it comes to the worst?
Yes, indeed. I can say that everything what we said maybe like 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, now we feel more confident because we have real capabilities. We have as well the political understanding that the Russia is a real threat, because it was mainly our problem that maybe most of European parts they didn't take it seriously. Now it's obvious, and this is I can say in certain circumstances a good thing. But as well, we need to understand that if we're talking about the NATO military participation in our region, in Estonia, we have the frame country is British, and also we have French troops here, and still we have US troops in the Baltic states and Poland. And this is very important that we are not only focusing on the Nordic, Baltic, and Poland and German cooperation, but it is about NATO.
Right. In this context, I wanted to ask you, what do you make of the US national security strategy that seems to suggest that current European leaders are wrong to support Ukraine, and it even sort of seems to suggest that the European Union is a problem. How do you see that from your perspective?
I'm not surprised about this paper because everything is exactly written down as President Trump and his administration has promised already before the elections happened. But we must take very seriously that this transatlantic relation is strong, but it is now different as it was before. So it is not unconditional, and we need to do more, really, as a Europe, as our region. And it's not only about defense, because we need to understand as well that for US, Europe is very important as a market, as a trade partner, as well as security guarantee in the meaning of keeping the peace in Europe. So, but we must be stronger. We must have more self-confidence, and also we must be maybe more loud and concrete with the relations with US. So we are very practical people on the border of Russia, and I think that Polish people exactly are the same. So we just need to understand what is the reality.
Right. Well, I think many Polish people would feel that you complimented them by saying that they are very rational. I think a tendency in Poland is to be very emotional about things, but I'm sure it will go down well in Poland, what you just said. But seriously speaking, don't you think that this strategy is also a bit contradictory? So on the one hand, as you rightly pointed out, it says the US needs stronger Europe and strong Europe. But at the same time, it calls for less European integration and a bigger role for the nation states. How does that look from the Baltic states' perspective? Would you enjoy more sovereignty in this understanding?
Actually, we need to focus on what we can do and what is in our national interests. And of course, we are in a very clear position that the European Union is an ally for the sovereign states, but we have a common interest, and it's mainly economical interest, but also the security. It is understandable somehow that President Trump's administration doesn't like European Union as an institution, but at the same time, Europe is very important for President Trump and his administration. And if you're talking about Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, I think that we have some kind of like special relation with the US historically and right now as well. And if you see what President Trump says, and also the War Secretary Hexet, or the Foreign Secretary, so I don't see any hesitation about collaboration with our region, or the other way around. They are bringing us as a good example for the trustful partners about defense and also economy. So maybe this is some leverage what we have, and also bring Europe together with us.
Right. Well, it seems not everyone in the United States is as confident as you, because the US Senate just passed legislation that would prevent the Trump administration from pulling US forces from Europe. And it specifically talks about reinforcing the Baltic states. It also speaks about keeping the US general in charge of NATO. So pretty much going against the current of what is in the national strategy. What is your reading of this?
One thing is, of course, it's a good thing that the Senate and also Congress, if you see both sides, I mean, Democrats and Republicans, they are in a very clear position about the Russian threat, and also the Baltic states and Poland. So we need to work every day to explain what is the reality, and also that US military participation in our region is very important. But during this review of the location of the troops in Europe, there was a decision from the President Trump's administration as well to keep the forces here. Of course, it's not the good message that they brought some troops out from Romania, but we need to work every day, because I think that U.S. Participation here in our region is one of the clearest messages as well to Russia that the deterrence is real.
But if you're saying you need to work on this every day, that seems to me to indicate that you see some inconsistency in the U.S. approach.
Yes, exactly what I'm saying, that our relations with the U.S., they are not unconditional. So we need to do more. And I'm not only talking about the Baltic states and Poland. We all going to invest 5% of GDP to defense next year already. But we need to go and explain. And actually, as a practical example, I have been visiting during the last year Washington as often as Brussels. So we need to be there and explain. But we need to do our part as well.
Okay, so switching subject to some of the other decisions that are now being discussed by the European Council meeting in Brussels. We just heard that the European Council, the European Union, added 60 more shadow fleet vessels to the list of sanctioned ships. So the total number is now 600. But what is very often not quite well understood by, I think, many of our viewers and citizens in Europe in general is why these ships are allowed to sail in the first place, and why aren't they stopped? Particularly that we see these hybrid attacks on NATO territory by Russia-linked entities increasing. So why is the response from Europe and from NATO so weak?
I cannot say that this is weak, because we are following as well the conventions of the free seas, that Russia has a right to pass the Baltic Sea. But especially in Estonia and Finland, we see every day hundreds and hundreds of tankers and also the shadow fleet vessels crossing the Baltic Sea. And if you can, of course, imagine that the distance between Helsinki and Tallinn is 80 kilometers. Then we have territorial sea, then we have economical waters, and then it's just like a 6 nautical miles, this corridor where 60% of Russian oil and gas export is happening. So we are following it very, very, very concretely, but we cannot block it.
Why not?
Against because this is against the international conventions, and we have no right.
But Russia is not observing conventions. Russia doesn't care about conventions. Russia is in clear violation of the UN Charter. It's violation of previous agreements. So
yeah, but we cannot follow that. We are going to do exactly the same things. But of course, we are doing much more for our security here. And also the listing the shadow fleet vessels, it's very important. And also the blockade that we don't let them into our ports in Europe. I'm not talking about Estonia and Finland. Yes, indeed, we cannot block the Baltic Sea totally for them, but we need to collaborate more, and it's not a concern for Estonia and Finland. I think that this is something that Europe and also the Baltic Sea countries must look into.
We had former Lithuanian Foreign Minister Mr. Landsbergis on this show a week ago, and he was saying that NATO doesn't really have a proper playbook on how to respond to these hybrid attacks or sabotage attacks in Europe. That it's mostly words, it's trying to scare Russia, but we also see that Mr. Putin doesn't care much for this. So is it time now to have some specific, concrete responses that will have sort of physical dimension rather than just words?
I'm not thinking that these are only words, but I agree that the question is not that how much can we do in the meaning of practical steps. We have increased the military capabilities in the eastern flank. We have called as well the Baltic Sentry and also the Eastern Sentry missions from the NATO, mainly after the drone attacks against Poland and also the heavy violation of the Estonian but the case is that Putin is playing with our fears. And one thing about these hybrid attacks and these actions, what we saw as well in Poland, this railway attack, this is something that Putin wants to put our societies under fear and also divide us. And I think that in our region, in Baltic states and also Poland, it's the other way around. People are more united and ready to act. But of course, NATO and Europe can do more.
Can I give you Minister, can I give you one specific example of what people say could be done to respond to some of these hybrid attacks? There is still a rail link from Russia going through the Baltic states. Could this be, for example, blocked in response to such attacks? Latvia seems to be leaning that way, but it says it needs support from you, from other Baltic states, from Poland. Is this a measure that, for example, you should take next time there is a really life-threatening sabotage attack?
But this readiness is here as well in Estonia to close the borders and 100% within a couple of hours if we see the need for that. So this is just one opportunity, but we have many other political decisions. What can we do? One example is actually why we let the Russian diplomats to move freely in Europe and enter as well to Europe. So this is something, we call them diplomats, but many of them, they are spies and organizing as well the different attacks against us, not only the Baltic states and Poland, but also in Germany and many other countries. So I think that we can do a lot more, but there is some kind of hesitation in Europe, and it's something we don't like.
Right. Going back to the summit that is taking place now, is there a risk that if no agreement is reached on financing Ukraine next week, what would it mean for Europe, for the viability of the European project, for the Baltic states' defense, and basically what does it mean for Europe if there is no agreement today?
at the momentum we have this interview, this is a crucial moment for Europe as well. And it's not a question about just funding Ukraine. It's a question about using Russian frozen assets. And this has like the three different layers. One is to give the very solid finance package to Ukraine. And we are talking about 90 billion euros for the next couple of years.
But
and
what will happen to Europe?
That,
what will happen to the Baltic states if no agreement is reached?
I think that Europe has now the opportunity to be in the middle of these talks and decisions about what is going to happen in Ukraine, and also what is going to happen during these peace talks or whatever talks they are finally. Because now Putin, but also, to be honest, US is not very much interested to bring Europe in. So it's about our future. It's about our security architecture. And if Europe is not able to find the opportunity to make a decision today or tomorrow during this summit, I think we are just making a huge mistake. And also, it's hard to explain for our taxpayers why we are not using the Russian and aggressor assets and asking the money from our taxpayers. It's harder and harder. I'm not talking about Estonia, but in Europe more broadly. So this is very, very historical momentum, I think.
Mr. Tsahkna, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for watching. This was the last On the Record in 2025. On behalf of our entire team, I say thank you for watching us and staying with us, and see you in the new year.